Begin by safely lifting and supporting your Macan. If you have a steel suspension, it's pretty straightforward. If you have PASM, air suspension, or a GTS, there are some special things you need to do to safely raise and support it. Please see our article and video on how to safely raise and support your Macan for additional assistance. With the wheel off, you can see the caliper, yellow arrow, and the brake disc or rotor. If you are replacing the rotor and you live in a four-season climate area, now would be a really good time to spray a little penetrating oil on the T30 torque locating screw, red arrow. Only do this if you are replacing the rotor. On the back of the wheel hub, release the brake pad wear sensor from its mount by lifting the small tab, red arrow, out of the holder and turn the connection 90 degrees and slide it out of the mount. Squeeze in the tab on the connector and separate the wiring connection, red arrow. Working on the caliper, you're going to release the brake pad wear sensor wiring from the caliper, yellow arrow. It just pulls straight out. The wiring will stay in the brake pad for the moment. The caliper is held onto the hub by two 14mm triple square bolts. Using a breaker bar and loosen, but do not remove these yet. Do not attempt to remove these bolts with anything other than the correct tool. You do not want to strip these bolts. Depending on how worn your pads and rotors are, you will need to make a little room to remove the caliper from the rotor. Take a screwdriver and place it in between the pad and rotor to compress the pistons back into the caliper and give you enough room to remove the caliper. Once you have done this, remove the M14 bolts. Safely hang the caliper out of the way. Never let the caliper hang from the brake line. You need to compress the pistons fully back into the caliper to make room for the new pads. There are various ways to do this, but I like to use a brake pad retraction tool. The calipers on the Macan are a work of art and really expensive. You don't want to risk scratching or damaging them by using a C-clamp or channel locks. Be sure to check the fluid level, red arrow, in the reservoir while you are doing this. You are pushing brake fluid back into the reservoir while compressing the pistons. Be prepared to remove some fluid if needed. If you are replacing the rotors, use a T30 torque and remove the locating screw as indicated by the red arrow. You will probably need to use a soft blow hammer to free the rotor from the flange. Be careful when doing this, that when the rotor lets loose, it does not fall on your feet. The rotors are surprisingly heavy. Use a wire brush and clean the flange surface so the mounting surface is clean and level. The old pads just slide off their mounting posts as indicated by the yellow arrows. The inside brake pad will have the wear sensor on it, red arrow. Just pass the wiring out through the caliper. If you are replacing the retaining springs, they just unclip from the inside of the caliper and new ones snap into place, yellow arrow. I always use new hardware. Depending on which brake system your Macan is equipped with will depend on the torque values to the M14 bolts. Our torque values involve a torque value, then an additional 90 degrees. This means stretch bolts to me, and I always replace them. Installation is the reverse of removal. Make sure that you keep the new pads and rotors clean and do not get any grease, anti-seize, or any other substance on the pads or rotors. Make sure to use all new hardware. Remember to pump the brakes to bring the pads into contact with the rotors. Bed the brakes according to the manufacturer of the pads and rotors you purchased. Remember, even with proper bedding, you will have diminished braking power for up to 125 miles. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out another video in this series.